Welcome and bienvenue. Welcome once again to another property podcast with myself, Hamish McClay, of course, of Search Conveyance. Special guest Tiffany Fairbrother, who herself is a renter and a friend of the show. So today's topic is, I'll bring it up so I don't get it wrong, pensioners. Not quite there yet. Private rent and the LHA gap. Now, as usual, I know nothing about these topics, so of course I'm going to get Hamish to start the show off.
Well, good afternoon, and I trust everybody had a good break. We're in bright sunshine here in Oxfordshire, and I guess a lot of the country will be the same. It's not quite so bright for people, though, other than the weather, the way certain things are going. We've got a lot of things being introduced as of the 1st of April. Certain things have changed, and there are other things unrolling as the year goes on. Much in the news is the sort of the cost of living and the fact that it is rising no matter what seems to happen, and it's really a combination of a number of things. Largest contribution, of course, happens to be what the government is introducing on an ongoing basis. And unfortunately, whilst the government is endeavouring to sort of pay out certain people within the community, it's not exactly working out right the way across the board. And there are disparities. And unfortunately, it's not really helping the balance of housing altogether, the way things are actually sort of, the way things are unfolding. First of all, there's the contribution that it's actually sort of made to rent by the local authority. And unfortunately, that has been fixed since 2024. There are a number of people, of course, although certain things are happening. We do know rental prices are going up, the gap's getting wider. So those people who are on fixed monies or limited funds who can't do anything about earning any extra, that gap is getting wider and wider. So they're having to dip into more of their savings, more of their money to try and cover the cost of energy and the cost of this new rent. And whilst a lot of the time we think of first-time buyers and thinking about young renters trying to get on the ladder, we do need to think also about those older renters, those pensioners in particular, who, while they might have a modest sort of increase, it's not, when you look at the overall, and we'll speak about the figures in due course, but it's that disparity really, whether it be old or young. Those in the middle, it's not quite as bad because many of them are within housing, but we've still got those extremes. And I think that gap is what the local authorities make available, is making it all the more difficult.
So for idiots like me, what is the LHA gap, and why should people who don't work in housing actually care about it?
Well, that particular, what the LHA side of things is what the local authority are going. It's a local housing. Is it local housing allowance?
Local housing allowance, yeah.
Yeah. It's the local housing allowance, which the local, if you like, local councils will contribute towards the rent of people within certain properties or within rented properties. And if they are offering, they say, we're going to fix, we have got a cap on the gap. Well, it's not a gap exactly. When we've got a cap on the allowance and we're going to pay you 500, if you happen to have your rent, and there's a lot of changes in rental things, a lot of landlords are selling up, we're going on the corporate side. If somebody turns around and says, we want £750 rent, which actually is pretty low down on the average price of rent across the countryside.
I don't know anywhere that's that low actually. Now I think they start.
Well, that's what I mean.
North of about 750, aren't they?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it might be the other way around, but I mean that was just as an example.
Okay.
That gap, the person who's renting it does need to find for themselves. And that's where part of the challenge is. But of course, as we know, all the rents are going up, and it is hitting anybody that's living in rented accommodation. But I mean, more so those who are trying to get on the ladder, and those who basically can no longer, if you like, they've retired, they're on that pretty well fixed income, although it's going up marginally. It doesn't really cover the cost of what the gap is, or what in fact the actual rent is.
All right, Tiffany, welcome to the show. You've been here before. Let me ask you, to your knowledge, and obviously you're more focused in your own sector, which is the private rental. How big is the gap between the LHA and actual rents right now, and what does that mean in real terms for someone in your neck of the woods, and more importantly, if you know about what it'd be like for someone who's living on a pension?
Yeah,
What
so
do
at
you
the minute that gap is getting significantly bigger. I think Hamish covered it quite well. The fact that the LHA has been frozen since 2024. It was
Right.
announced in the autumn budget that it was continuing to be frozen again for 2026, 2027. So the LHA has been frozen. The rents are increasing every year. There's no doubt about that the rents increase every year.
So it's a
So
disparity because it's
yeah,
not moving in line with the rents.
yeah,
So
yeah.
right,
Yeah, so
right,
that gap is continuously getting bigger. So as Hamish said, somebody that has got an LHA of £500, the council will pay £500 towards their rent. And then every year their rent is increasing from £750 a month to £800 a month. That gap that they need to find the money themselves is just getting bigger.
all right, all right. So look, casting your mind back over the last 5-10 years, what's changed over that time that's made this problem worse, other than the fact that it's been frozen and yet the rents are gradually increasing? Are there, other factors to take into account?
Yeah, so obviously we're in that economy where everything is just getting more expensive. So the fact that the rents are going up and people aren't getting the help they need towards their rent is just adding on to extra things, energy bills, food prices, water rates, etc., etc. So people are paying out more. People aren't getting the money in that they need, but are paying more out every single year. So it's not
Right.
just the fact that the rent is going up; it's everything else on top. It's general living. So where we're in an economy, especially with pensioners, where we all know the famous phrase of heating or eating, it's making things 10 times worse when they now have to find extra money towards the rent.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I'm in a privileged position. I own my own house, but here's the problem: I use heating oil, and that's gone up 200% in my area. I could comfortably afford putting heating oil. I haven't put any heating oil for the last 3 months. We're on the dregs now, and I can't afford to find £1,000 to put in there at the moment. So, I'm not sure what we're going to do, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Do you think the system is kind of assuming that family will step in?
Oh, absolutely. The So it gets to the point where people are either having to rely on charities or families, and a lot of elderly people don't, unfortunately, don't have families left. They've either their families have grown up and moved on, and they sort of moved away, or they just don't have anybody left. I don't think people realize just how many elderly people there are that have nobody left.
Right.
So
So,
they've got no help.
would you say it's becoming more and more common?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As horrible as it is to say, the amount of times of people living on their own that have unfortunately then passed away, and then you get the police saying we're trying to find relatives of such and such a person because they've got no next of kin because they've got nobody.
Okay, I've got a hard question for you now. Are landlords, in your opinion, actively avoiding tenants on housing support, or is this more about economics and discrimination?
No, I found that private landlords do tend to try and swerve away from those that are on any sort of benefits. I think it's more so because I think they believe that people that work and aren't on benefits are more reliable in paying the rent.
Right.
or it's this whole thing of the rent gap, that they know that even if they do get housing benefit, there's a potential that the tenants can't top up, and then they'll just be falling into rent arrears. But yeah, I do very much believe in this area anyway, that tenants on any sort of benefits do struggle a lot more to find any sort of private accommodation.
We've been talking about problems till now, and I'm just going to ask you to use your big brain and come up and maybe brainstorm whether or not you think there are any solutions. What would fixing this actually look like? Is it as simple as raising the LHA, or is the problem deeper than that now?
I think unfreezing the LHA would help massively, but I don't think it will fix the underlying issues.
So you
Because the
think that would be like a stopgap kind of thing?
Yeah. It would be like putting a plaster over a burst water pipe.
Oh, right, yes.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so putting unfreezing the LHA would fix issues slightly, but there are deeper issues. Like I said, just the general cost of living, because people aren't earning enough or getting enough in to be able to afford the rent increases.
Hamish, is this situation, which appears you could have seen it coming from a mile off, because the rents have been increasing, the LHA has been locked, do you think the government could have done something about this sooner, put a plan in place to do something about it sooner? I'm losing faith that they've actually got their finger on the pulse.
Well, yes, you're not the only one. You're not the only one there, Gareth. I think we have a challenge. It is foreseeable. I mean, it's quite obvious, isn't it? If this does not rise, if what the local authorities that are going to be able to, then you've got to think about it from two ways as well. The councils themselves haven't got the money. They're now expected to fund so many other things that have been imposed upon them by the government, that they're having to fund things which they previously weren't expecting, like the number of residents coming in there, largely from abroad. Basically, they're expected to be finding housing for them. They're also meant to be finding housing for the local people. And of course, who takes precedent? Well, it's those that don't have any accommodation at all, which will be actually the sort of the new arrivals on the scene. But there's also the other aspect, because we've got so many different, you almost need a sort of qualifications of one kind or another. Maybe it's a degree, perhaps you ought to set up a few, so everybody goes forward, or you get a year's training on how to actually sort of work within the system, not to beat it, but how to work with it. Because a lot of people don't actually know what help and support is available to them. Pensioners particularly, there are many of them are proud people, and they've survived, and they don't know anything about pension credits. Nobody specifically told them, and they're not going to put their hand up and say, hey, look, we're broke, we can't afford any heating.
Yes.
And things, so there's a combination of several aspects. The government funds are drained, but it should have been fairly obvious to anybody coming in as a government to say, we're going to fix this. The Conservatives were aware of it. They realised the mess that they created when they froze it for a couple of years. It made a significant difference in 2024. But of course, when you think what the prices have done since 2024 to now, including rental, really that local allowance is not sufficient to support people. And there are genuine people who need that support who can't do anything about it. We do have to find the balance, and we're back to that same balance. It was foreseeable, but unfortunately, it wasn't really looked into or considered to be a challenge at the particular sort of time. I mean, the focus does change of our government, but it doesn't appear to be towards the majority of the residents living in this country.
Tiffany, you're a working mum. You've got stresses of your own. this must be just like an added extra pressure. It's almost like you can see the locomotive coming from a mile off, and it's actually coming closer and closer. Is there a message you could give to people in a similar position to yourself? Perhaps either of hope or...
Yeah, so it's one of those things that none of us in any sort of position of mine can do anything about. But I want to make stress to everybody: if there's help available, if you need help, ask for help.
So
Because as Hamish said, there's so many, especially pensioners, that are proud people that don't know of anything else
Right.
available to them,
Right.
that will just sit back and let it happen.
Right,
Anybody
right.
that needs help needs to ask for help.
And what would be a good place, a good starting point for them, do you think?
Friends, family, charities, citizens advice, anything like that. Any local community reach out points. Anybody that... there's always somebody that can help. There's always somebody that can point somebody in the right direction. They just need to ask for that help.
Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's worth re-emphasising that there is help available. Unfortunately, we still have this challenge. I mean, as Tiffany just sort of explained then, she's pointing to certain directions. However, it depends who you ask as to what support you're going to get. Now, there was a pension I was speaking to the other day there. They need significant change to their property to bring the energy performance up much, much higher. And it's going to cost thousands of pounds to actually implement this change. They can't afford it. They've been put in touch. The funding is available, allegedly, from the local council. But the local council, they've actually haven't even responded to the initial request. So there aren't enough people to support this particular area. We've got enough civil servants. You would have thought they could have shared a few of them about a bit that could actually sort of work on things of this particular nature. And civil servants, and I mean those that work with the local council as well. There really is. The money is not going to the right place. We're living it, unfortunately, so much is being spent on welfare that we cannot afford the other basic issues which really the general population need. And I think until that actually sort of changes, but it is not helping the housing situation, the housing supply. And with the welfare policy that we have, the realities of now what the rental market is doing, and more properties being taken over, like we're saying, with new people taking over these properties for rent, nothing but the increase in the sort of monthly rent is going to be apparent. It just keeps growing and growing, and of course that difference keeps getting wider and wider. So, not a simple solution, but just another in the day-to-day issues. And we're fortunate that we're getting towards the summer. We have had some milder weather, but still the temperatures drop overnight. So what do people do? They're still forced down this route, heat or eat in many respects. And I don't see that it's helping in any way at all, particularly in view of the number of houses we were hoping for hasn't been met either. Number of affordable houses. So we're struggling a bit.
Hamish, we've banged on about the fact that the gap between the amount of promised new homes and the amount that have actually been produced is quite dramatic, but perhaps that's for a different day. Once again, let me thank Hamish McClay of Convey, who helped set this up in the first place. Esteemed visitor, Tiffany Fairbrother, a friend of the show and a person who actually lives this reality. And for myself, thank you all for watching. Remember, there are a number of other property shows coming up. We have one every day of this week. From tomorrow, we've got It's a Kind of Magic, one of my favorite shows. We talk about all things to do with search. And also to do with IPSA, the Association of Independent Personal Search Agents. We've got, of course, Property Quorum on Thursday and Cladding Matters on Friday. To all of you watching, please, in these troubled times, try and keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please, please, look after your mental health. As Tiffany said, help is out there. You just got to look. Take care. Bye bye. Until next time.